So some of you guys might remember the Dell Optiplex that we took a look at, well, a couple weeks ago, and then we took a look at. It was one of the cheapest PCs. I don't know if it was labeled as gaming PC. I don't know. One of the cheapest PCs on Amazon at the time. Got it for $150. Did some upgrades to it, but I took a look at it a couple weeks ago to see if it was any good in 2022, and seeing what games it could still play. Well, I got a couple other ones to look at. All right, so a couple of more popular games right now are, of course, the massive multiplayer, like Battlefield 2042, Warzone 2, and stuff like that, especially Warzone 2. A lot of people playing that. They've both had some problems. Battlefield 2042, when it came out, glitchy, some issues, some problems. Warzone 2 has that to some extent. A lot of people are pretty upset with that whole thing. But 2042 has gone back and made some improvements as time has gone, sort of the way of No Man's Sky, where it came out, had some issues, but it's genuinely started to kind of improve and turn into a decent game. I'm hoping the same can happen with Modern Warfare 2, but we'll just have to see. I went ahead and I tested both of these, the Battlefield 2042, and went ahead and tested Warzone 2 on this Dell to see how they work. The specs are a little bit higher than what I've got. The second one, they fall well within, but we're going to go ahead and take a look at them. So first, we'll start with the minimum specs of Battlefield 2042. It requires a Ryzen 5 1600 or an i5 6600K, neither of which exist in that box right now. It's got a 4670. 8 gig of memory, which we got 16, 4 gig of VRAM, which we do have because it's on the RX 6400. The video card has to be a GTX 1050 Ti or an RX 560. I think we've got that licked. DirectX 12, we already know that, yes, that DirectX 12 will work on that box. And 100 gig of hard drive space. We're getting into some, pretty big downloads. The 67 gig is what I needed for this so far. I don't know how much more it's going to need. The recommended specs on it are a little bit higher, of course. Ryzen 5 2700X, which was the top of the line Zen Plus at that time, or Core i5 4790. This is what kind of made me think that we might be able to pull off the 4670 because it's just a little bit higher spec than what we have in there. 16 gig of memory, got it. 8 gig of VRAM, we have 4. The RTX 3060 or an RX 6600. Those are the video cards that would have to be in this system. I think we've got the minimum covered, sort of. We'll see. For Warzone 2, the minimum specs are quite a bit underneath what we have. It requires a Ryzen 3 1200, seen one of those in a while, or a Core i5 2500K, 8 gig of memory. Again, we've got it covered. A GTX 960 or an RX 470, and 125 gig of storage. It does not say how much VRAM we need. I'm figuring that with either one of those cards, a GTX 960, I believe, was 3 gig. It might have been 4, so we should have this covered. The recommended specs on this are Ryzen 5 1400, again, not very high, or a Core i7 4770. I think we're pretty close to the recommended in that case, especially because it's 12 gig of memory and we have 16, and the GTX 1060 or an RX 580 is what's recommended, and we have a little bit better with the RX 6400. That's the minimum and recommended for both of these games. Now, what actually happens when we're trying to actually play these games? So we started out with Battlefield 2042, and right away, it took a while to load. Quite a while. I will have to see on another machine if it's that the default for how long it takes. I have a feeling it's because it was trying to process this and load everything in, and it just took a while for this processor. I was able to go ahead and start a game. It defaulted me to 720p. I bumped that up to 1080 low because I wanted to see if this thing could actually game at 1080. I didn't have much of a problem playing. Honestly playing. It was harder for me to get the hang of the game than anything else. I had no problem finding enemies. I did have a problem trying to find resources to reload or whatever. Yeah, it would, after a while, I mean, the rounds do take a long time, but I do understand that there is a lot of players, there's a lot of bots, there's a lot of everything going on, And so it's pretty involved. I was getting about 30 frames per second, which is not bad. I was getting that or higher, usually 30 to 32 frames per second and up. So maybe I should lock this at 30 frames per second and have a little bit smoother experience. But after a few minutes of playing, I didn't notice that it was that low, and I was into the game more than I was worried because it did run fairly smooth. I didn't have any major glitches or anything like that. I did go ahead and drop it down to 900p, 900 low, and it, again, worked pretty well. I was getting on the average about 20 frames more than I was on the original setting, 1080 low. So it was a little bit better, but again, after a few minutes, I forgot what resolution it was on. I forgot all the settings and all that stuff, and just it was playable and it was pretty fun, and I got pretty involved in it, and I have to say that I enjoy the game. Does it still have problems? Yeah. Again, it's not so fun when you run out of ammo and you're looking all over the place trying to find something without getting shot first. Anyway, it is what it is. So 2042 ended up being a pretty good experience. So I moved over to Warzone 2. Warzone 2 has less minimum specs, it has less minimum requirements, and I thought, okay, this maybe would be a little bit easier. And it did. It did load easier. It was a little bit of a learning curve. The game itself was pretty good. I was able to drop in and start playing. If you're near buildings or something like that, your frame rate is going to be higher. Near or inside buildings, your frame rate is higher. It was much easier trying to find resources. It was much harder trying to find enemies. With Battlefield 2042, I could play against bots. With Warzone 2, it was a live arena. The minimum settings, I could play like deathmatch and try to limit that way. Just play one-person teams. I didn't want anybody to have to depend on me. But still, it's loading in 150 people plus. And so, yeah, the resources, it surprised me how well this part worked. When you're out and about in the countryside or trying to, through the regular terrain, it drops down closer to 30 frames per second. But inside buildings or in that area, it will go up a little bit. I did also drop this down to 900p, and I saw a little bit better frame rates, a little bit better frames per second, but not measurably enough. I was okay playing this on 1080p with low settings, and yeah, it was pretty decent. I was able to find vehicles and drive them, and all. I don't have footage of the 900p because my camera battery died and I was playing, and I didn't have time to stop to try to go get another battery to load into here to get a lot of that footage, so I only have the 1080p footage. But it was a little bit higher, but not noticeably so. I thought we were already doing okay with the 1080p low, so that's probably what I would choose to go ahead and play this on. Both games I kind of enjoyed and got into playing, and for a couple hours on each one, it was all right. The biggest learning curve I had with Warzone 2 was just finding people, just finding another person. And while I was hiding and ducking and covering and trying to find people, other people were doing the same thing. And until the size of the map starts to shrink and shrink, a lot of times you're not. I guess it's going to be harder to find people. I think the first time on Warzone I was like 121st, and the second time I was like 52nd or something like that. I did survive the gulag the second time around. That was pretty cool. But anyway, both of these games played better than I thought they would on this Optiplex. So while this Optiplex will not play games very well like Far Cry 6 or Cyberpunk, they will play some of these massive multiplayer games like Warzone and Battlefield and all that. So I was pretty happy there. So if you're looking for a machine, especially, I know some of these esports titles like Valorant and Fortnite and all that stuff will run pretty well on this because those minimum specs are lower as well. But I was surprised that some of these more demanding, what I would think are demanding multiplayer games run pretty well, and I was pretty happy to see it. There is a suggestion for me to go ahead and step up that CPU, and I might do that just to see if I can tweak a little bit more out and get a little bit better performance in, say, 2042. I don't know what it's going to do to my frame rate, or I don't know. We'll have to play around with that and see what a good suggestion is. On Battlefield 2042, it dropped me into 720p. It did not do that suggestion. As a matter of fact, Warzone, I want to think, when it first came up, was 1080 low. Because it asked me if I wanted to, I changed computers, and it told me that it was on a different machine. Would I like to load the recommended specs for that machine? And I said yes. And so I think it was 1080p that it actually put me in at. So we'll see. I'll have to play around with both of these. Is this the last time you see this Optiplex? Probably not, because we might go ahead and get a CPU and check it out again. Is it the last time you see either one of these games on this channel or my alternate gaming channel that I'm trying to start? No, you'll see one of the two. I'll probably end up playing one of these or the other one, maybe both. They're different enough where I might be able to get used to playing either or. I'm probably going to stick with one or the other, though. I'm not really sure which one yet. We'll have to see. We'll just have to see what happens. In any case, I'm sure it will show up somewhere, so stay tuned for that. Make sure if you're not already subscribed, do that, or go check out the gaming channel. It's only just starting. Cut me a break on that one. I'm trying to increase the cadence here and trying to increase the quality here. The overflow will end up on that channel, so I'm working on it. I'll get it. I'll get it. But in any case, don't forget to visit me on the other socials, buymeacoffee.com. I try to stream once a week and, all kinds of other stuff. But don't forget to visit me on the other socials. The last thing I'm going to ask you to do, though, is just be nice to each other. Wave, smile, hold the door open, something. A little thing can go a long way. Now, I mean, think how you feel when somebody tells you good morning or waves or smiles or something, or holds the door open for you or whatever. Do that for somebody else. It's just a nice thing to do, If we all spend a little bit more time being nice to each other instead of griping at each other, we'd probably all be just a little bit better off, wouldn't we? Anyway, that is all I have for right now. I do have something interesting coming up. G-Skill. I found a product by G-Skill. The folks that make memory and storage and stuff like that. This is not memory or storage. So stay tuned. It's coming. Anyway, until I get into that, literally get into that, that's all I got. So I'll see you later.